Good day, folks. Welcome to another episode of Ice Ice Beta, a podcast about ice climbing, mixed, and comp tooling. And I'm your host, Aaron Gary. Today we have more announcements than normal, which I'll put at the end of the episode. Just one teaser, though. If you love screaming barfies, and who doesn't, boy, do we have a challenge for you. So hang around for the end of the episode. With that out of the way, this week we chat with Ryan McCauley, a member of the USA ice climbing team. Ryan has had a rapid rise, fitting for her specialty and speed. In fact, within 2 years of starting to dry tool, Ryan went from falling off the second hold of rec team tryouts to finishing 6th overall in women's speed climbing during last year's World Cups. According to Ryan, this wouldn't have been possible just a few years ago. The idea of trying something new was uncomfortable and messy and fraught with vulnerability. Rather, she was accustomed to risk mitigation and results-driven enjoyment, not a spontaneously signing up for an unknown sport with strangers. Dry tooling allowed her to be a beginner again, and that has changed everything. Listen on as we talk about the ways we hold ourselves back, expectations versus intentions, and defining our own success. Hey Ryan, how's it going?
Hey, Aaron. I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. So normally you just launch right into the questions, and I have this one teed up for you. Okay. Post-pandemic, a lot of people were making changes, whether it was switching careers or moving or throwing away all their sourdough starter because they're sick of making sourdough bread. Guilty. For you, though, you decided to start dry tooling. How come?
Yeah, that's a great question. I did try and make bagels once from scratch. It went terribly. I don't know why I thought it would be fun when I know I don't like being in the kitchen. But that aside, I think leading up to the pandemic, a lot of my professional career, I have made my job so much of my identity. And I've worked in like mission-driven organizations. I've been in education. And so it's been really fulfilling in some ways. And I think I had like this longing for something outside of that for a long time. And I kind of kept pushing it away or trying to like fit it into where I had room in my job. And I think after the pandemic, and I guess I don't know if I should say after, because it was summer of 2021. So things were still not, it wasn't fully over, but I found the ice coop and really wanted to get more involved in it. It just seemed like something that was pushing me out of my comfort zone in a way that I was really longing for, and that was something different.
What was it about dry tooling specifically?
So my background is in sport climbing, and I think it's interesting because what initially drew me to climbing was someone I was dating. And so I think I kind of got into climbing because I was like, oh, he climbs, and it could be a way to connect, or I probably wanted to impress him at the start. And then we broke up, and I kind of have this relationship with climbing where after we broke up, I was like, I'm going to get better at climbing than I ever was before. And like, I don't need men in my life. I'm going to do it with women. And like, that's my goal. And for like 2 years, I fully dove into climbing only with women. I built up a community with other strong women. And I was really a beginner when I started this quest to get really good. Like I don't think I was really leading. I think I remember at one point I did start leading. I led my first like 10B, and I was so proud of myself. I like invested in getting my own rope. I got my own quick draws. It felt like big investments. And I remember going to Crags and being like, I'm going to try this 10D, and like, I might have to use a lever beaner because like the other woman I'm with, I don't know that we can make it to the top. And like, this is really pushing me. And like, that sounds so silly now looking back because I've been doing it longer. And so my experience looks different. But there was something so empowering about that. And I think I like just had such a sense of pride around that, and a sense of connection, a sense of trust with myself. And I think kind of over the years, I moved, my job changed, and like different things in my life shifted. And I think I lost some of that, honestly. So climbing still represented that to me. And I think dry tooling felt kind of like the next step. It felt like something that was even a little more scary, a little more risky. Like you're bouldering at the ice coop with these sharp tools. Like, can you not stab yourself? I was very um concerned by it. But when I went, I was like, oh my gosh. I think with sport climbing, oftentimes I'll find a route that is like you are either really strong, but maybe you don't have to be as precise. Like maybe you're dynoing and it's to a jug or something. Or maybe you're really precise on these like crimp holds and you have to be really balancy, but maybe it's not as powerful in that same way. And I think dry tooling combines both of those things. Like it's really powerful and it's really precise, and so it felt like I had to be like really present, really on, and I think trust myself to make what felt like really scary moves sometimes too.
I guess, how did you come across it? Because I know that in was it 2018, Denver had the World Cup. Was that sort of like your first introduction to
Yeah.
it, or because it's still a pretty esoteric sport?
I I actually signed up for a dry tooling clinic with Will Gadd out of City Rock in Colorado Springs. I think that was the end of 2016 or 2017. Um, and I remember they were having a competition, so you could sign up to do clinics before, and then you could stay and watch the competition. First off, Will Gadd was so kind and down to earth and such a great teacher. And I signed up with my husband, with a couple of their friends, and I don't even know how we stumbled across it, but it was so fun. I remember like going home and we had a hangboard with a pull-up bar and we were like hanging our tools off of that, being like, "Oh my gosh, we're going to get so into this." And watching the competition was so exciting. Like, wow, like I can't even fathom how are they doing these movements? They're so strong. Um and that was what did I 2016, 2017, and the ice coop wasn't around. I didn't know of other people doing this, so there were maybe a couple times where my husband and I would go and do a little bit of dry tooling outside or kind of like make an ice route, like a little bit of a more of a mixed route and kind of play around with some of what we had learned. And then I think it was 2019, the Denver World Cup, we went and watched that. And I was in the audience being like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. These people are so strong. God, I cannot imagine like what that would be like. So I had really been like so enamored by it. And then I was volunteering as an instructor for the high altitude mountaineering school through the Colorado Mountain Club. And another instructor was part of the ice coop. And I think this was in 2020. And he was telling me about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go. That's incredible. We did this dry tooling clinic. I want to learn. And then I was asking him more about it. And he was like, yeah, it's this like kind of small garage size thing. And I was like, "Well, you can wear masks, right?" And he's like, "Well, no, you bite your tools, so you can't." And I was like, I don't. COVID made me very anxious, so, and I was like, I don't think that's for me right now. But thanks so much for letting me know. And then fast forward a year in 2021, I think it popped back up on my radar through Instagram or something, and I saw they had a ladies' night, and I was like, okay, I've been wanting to do this. I feel like this is the perfect opportunity. I should just dive in and go. And if it's terrible, whatever. Um, and I swindled one of my friends to go with me because I was really scared. And I was like, I'm going to make a fool of myself. And I want to do that by myself. Um, and it was so fun. And the people were so welcoming. And I felt like they were excited to have beginners and excited to give feedback and advice. And like, I didn't feel judged. I felt like it was just a really safe space to kind of make mistakes and not know what you're doing. So that was kind of my long, winding path to get to the ice coop in the first place. And then when I was there, I think I heard about the ice coop rec team, and I was like, oh, so like I can come in a safe environment with a coach who will tell me what to do. That sounds great.
So you went to the World Cup in Denver, and you're like, wow, like, I can't believe what they're doing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And then you started dry tooling in July of 2021. And then by January of 2022, you were doing what those people at the World Cup in Denver were doing. is you were competing at the Ice Climbing World Cup, World Championships with Team USA. It's crazy progression. So you went from really not dry tooling to being on Team USA. How did your first year come together? How did that work out?
Yeah, it like totally bananas, right? So, yeah, I went to the ladies' night. I think it was in July or August of 2021. I signed up for the rec team. I think that started in October of 2021. But I remember even when I tried out for the rec team, they had tryouts and Tyler Kempney was the coach. And my sense was that it was just to kind of see who was coachable and like who could kind of make mistakes and learn from it and take feedback well. But I put so much pressure on myself. I was like, I really want to do this well. I want to be on this team. And I remember we signed up to do tryouts at 6 a.m. And so we got up at like 4:30. We drove out. It was my husband and I. I think we were probably like bickering on the way there because we were exhausted and I was stressed. And I fell off like the second hold of an easy route there. I remember I was so nervous. I just like took the tool totally wrong and fell off. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not making this team. I need to leave. And I so appreciate that Tyler was like, I want to know who's coachable. Like, that's what this team is about. It's not about getting it perfect. And so I think because I knew that that was his perspective and his approach, I like really went all in on the team and really tried to incorporate everything I learned right away and push myself out of my comfort zone. I remember someone had told me about this competition in Michigan and they were like, you should go. Would you want to sign up? And I was like, oh my gosh, no, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never competed. That's terrifying. And I met another woman on the recreational team who, like, one of the first days together, she was like, you know what? I had a couple glasses of wine and I signed up and I don't know what I'm doing and it's going to be great. And I was like, you're in such a similar situation and like your mindset about this was so much more fun where I was like, I have not calculated how I would do this and like I haven't engineered the uncertainty out of it and it doesn't feel responsible or like all the shoulds. And I was just like, I want that. I want that same energy that you're bringing to this situation. And so I made this really, for me, kind of stressful and spontaneous decision to book a flight to go to this competition. I think I booked it like 48 hours in advance. I remember I had to ask my boss, like, can I take a half day like tomorrow? Which for me was really uncomfortable. I was like, I still care. I'm so sorry. And there was something so freeing about it. Like, I feel like it was this impetus to be like, you don't have to be just your job. And like, there's so much good that can come from actually really listening to what you're longing for and figuring out what's behind that. And also, like, you don't have to have it all planned and you don't have to be trying for the podium to make this like a good experience. So I think the pandemic really, just I think helped me get to this place where I realized I had been longing for more of that for such a long time. And I had been the one suppressing it in a lot of ways. Like, sure, the pandemic made things difficult, but I think it also made me realize like I was getting in my own way in a lot of um, the decisions I was making and what I was choosing to prioritize. Um, when I signed up for the comp, I remember kind of thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never been in a competition. I don't even know how that works. Do I even have the right gear? And when I showed up, these routes, they were on ropes, which obviously at the ice coop, they don't have ropes. It's all bouldering. And I realized like I didn't know anything about what was different with that. And there was even a lead climb. And I mean, I've led climbing, but I've not led dry tooling. And so I remember being very intimidated by that, but everyone was so kind. Everyone was so welcoming. And I even remember making a really great connection with one of the belayers. And he was so kind because I tied in with a Yosemite finish like I would at the climbing gym. And he was like, just so you know, like in this sport, if you're doing competitions with the UIAA, like you actually need to do it this way. You can't do the Yosemite finish. You have to have an overhand knot. And so there were a lot of things I was like, oh God, I didn't know that. Thank you. And I was really grateful for how open other competitors were about like, hey, we have a few minutes to like look at this route. Do you want to talk about it with me? Like, hey, do you want to walk through what you think you would do in this specific scenario? And so that made it feel so much more accessible. And I remember being so proud of my performance, but I actually wasn't even thinking about the ice climbing team because I had categorized that as something that wasn't realistic for me. So I was focusing on just the competition, the experience. And what I told myself is I want to get to know other people in the community. I want to like push myself out of my comfort zone here. I want to learn more about this sport and I want to get more practice because I signed up for the rec team to really improve. And I think that this is one way I can push myself to do that. So I think I surprised myself in how I competed in some ways. Like I did better on some of the routes than I would have expected for it to be my first competition. And on the lead one, I think I made it to the pre-clipped bull and then like tried to do a figure four, which I don't think I'd ever done before. And it like totally went awry and I fell off. And so that one was like, not anything to write home about, but because everyone was so welcoming, then I felt comfortable being like, hey, did you have feedback? Like, was that even a figure four? Did I even do it right? And it made it a more empowering experience.
And spoiler, you made the World Cup team or Team USA.
I was really shocked by that because, like I said, that wasn't my focus at the time. And I remember coming back to work after that and people are like, oh, how was the competition? Like, didn't you go, you did something last minute, you did some climbing thing, right? And I remember I had trouble saying like, yeah, I just made the USA ice climbing team because it just felt like such a wild thing to say after my coworkers were like, oh yeah, you just like wanted to do this fun little climbing thing, right? And so I found myself because that felt so weird to me and so kind of from left field, I found myself kind of diminishing it in some ways and be like, well, there were only like 9 women that showed up and it's not a big deal. It's a small sport, but yeah, I remember Kendra Stritch calling me from the selection committee and telling me that I made the team and I was like, excuse me, sorry, I what? What does that mean? Uh, I think it also made me realize that sometimes not having to plan everything and making a spontaneous decision based on something that I care about can result in things that I never would have imagined.
So hearing stories about other competitions, especially at such an elite level, you oftentimes might hear, competitors being cold to each other at the least, maybe worse. But here it sounds like everyone was really welcoming and friendly. And so what was it about that competition, or maybe just dry tooling, if you want to generalize? I don't know if we can, but what is it about? What was it about that event that people were just so willing to, reach out and encourage you and mentor you?
I think the community that I've experienced with dry tooling has been really different. And I had not competed in other sports in my adult life. I have heard that from people who have been in different climbing competitive spaces or other sports that is somewhat unusual and that's something that they've found to be really different about dry tooling. There's something special too, I think, about being kind of on the frontier of what's a pretty small, newer niche sport in the US, is that we're kind of like I think about it in similar ways to being at a startup or when I was at a charter school. It's like we're kind of all in the mess together and we're trying to figure it out and we're all doing our best. And there's something really bonding about that. And that I think helps us progress even faster too when we're able to connect and lift one another up.
Where do you think the sort of diminishing of the accomplishment came from? And did you did you uh, did you get over that through the course of that season as you progressed?
Yeah, I think it probably relates to other mindsets that have popped up a lot as I kind of made this shift into not having my professional work define me as much. I think I had a fear of like celebrating some of those accomplishments. And I think a lot of my success was defined on the outcome, but in a way that I told myself, like, oh, I have to really have like worked so hard and gone through more time and effort to have this be something worth celebrating. Like it's not enough until I reach some point in the future, I think. And so because it wasn't something that I had intentionally identified as a goal and told myself like, "Oh, I want to make the team and so I'm going to train in this way and I'm going to like get on the podium," and like kind of this archetype that I had in my head for what success looked like and what an accomplishment worth celebrating meant. I don't even think I really stopped to think about that. I was just very naturally like, oh well, yeah, it's kind of this ridiculous thing, and there aren't that many people in it, and I just rationalized it away.
I mean, dry tooling is a little ridiculous.
I mean, yeah, I don't disagree with that.
I actually have a background in startups too, and I got away with it. I got away from it rather, uh, in part because I didn't really like the mentality. It sort of I found like it forces you to always try to think like you're changing the world, and inherently, I don't think that's wrong. But there's a sort of like egotism to it. Like you always have to be looking for the bigger problem, the
Yeah.
bigger impact, because by nature that's going to solve a bigger problem and presumably make more money at the end. And what I had to come away for myself with was, there's self-worth in just doing something fun or choosing something that is maybe more of a direct impact on a friend or a relationship. And yeah, I don't know, I got warped a bit.
Yeah, no, I think it is related to warped mindsets I had in my own head. And I opted into an environment that continued to reinforce those.
So you make the team, and in your words, this is totally bananas. And then you're traveling internationally for the World Cup. What was going through your head, and how did you do? Can you just talk us through that first competition season?
Yeah, I believe that first competition season, there were 3 or 4 World Cups. I had gotten the 10th spot, I'm pretty sure, on the team. So for men and women, there are 10 spots for each gender. And you can only have 6 individual athletes for men and 6 for women that compete in each World Cup for a certain discipline. So, like lead or speed. And so the top 6 get their first choice. And then if there are openings beyond that, they'll offer it to the 7th place, the 8th place, the 9th place, and so on. Um, and so I think there was one slated to be in South Korea, and I think there were 2 slated to be in Russia. And then there was the World Championship in Saas-Fee, Switzerland. And I had a spot available at Saas-Fee, Switzerland for the 10th spot. So I took that. I mean, I was also working full time at a startup. So I don't think there were openings at the other spots, but I don't think I also had the PTO to make that work. So I just focused on Switzerland. Um, and when I went there, I remember a lot of doubt of like, should I be traveling? I mean, we still aren't fully over the pandemic. I don't know how to do this. Like, are there buses? Where's this venue? How do I navigate this? So I was really fortunate in that there was another teammate, Lindsay Hastings, who had traveled internationally for competitions before. And she was a real mentor to me that season to help me kind of navigate the logistics of getting there. And I'm so grateful. I don't know that I would have gone if I didn't have her. And I'm so grateful she was also a strong female that could show me a lot about how the competition worked and talk me through different things that were very new to me. It made it feel more accessible. But then when I got there, it did feel totally wild to me. And so there was a sense of this might never happen again. Like, I don't know how I somehow managed to get through this loophole and I'm in this situation that I never would have imagined. And so when I chose to go, there was something that shifted where I was like, I don't care how I place. I just want to like soak up this whole experience. And so I I was really proud of myself for getting out there and climbing. I do remember there were moments where I had all my stuff organized with my gloves and my hand warmers and my liquid chalk. And I think they called my name earlier than I expected. And I totally panicked and like threw my gloves in the air or something. So I was definitely a little bit messy with trying to figure out how to warm up and where I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to do, and a lot of nerves. But I was really proud of myself for climbing there, and I placed well for it, especially I think given that I didn't have a lot of experience. I think I was in the 20s somewhere for qualification, which was not where I needed to be if I wanted to go to semifinals, but that wasn't even on my radar. So I was really excited and everything just kind of felt so magical to me. And I do remember seeing other athletes who had been doing it for longer who were understandably getting more frustrated about mistakes they had made or experiencing a lot of pressure around the rankings. And I think because I was newer, because I didn't know as many people that deeply on the team, and because I was so excited, chose to distance myself from that at times because I didn't want to have that mentality. I didn't want to feel frustrated. I wanted to hold on to that kind of magic. And I think it just made me think about like, wow, if this is possible, like what could one or two more seasons open up?
So you were intentionally trying to cultivate this like mindset or mentality of appreciation and gratitude for just being there, it sounds like.
That was the goal. I think having worked in a startup environment, I think I tend to fuel an inner narrative of, oh, I need to do more. I need to do better. What could be improved? And that's been my default for a while. And I think I was really trying to push back on that for this trip because it just felt like such a shift from that.
So I was actually interviewed Eli Ellis on this podcast, and he was talking about how when he was going for what was going to be the world record for a high line, I think it was like 1,000 feet or something. He tried it the day before. He said it went okay. He didn't feel great. I think he was even feeling a little sick. And then the day that he was going for the send, he gets up there and he's like, "You're not going to send. You already fell. You fell. It doesn't matter." I don't know if he was repeating this to himself, but at some point early on in that attempt, he had this sort of mantra and this mindset. And lo and behold, he goes and sends it. And he talked about this idea of like negative self-talk and this interesting dynamic where like if you have expectations, it kind of really starts to have like a flywheel effect for you. Yeah, I guess it's just really interesting that you were very intentional about distancing yourself with dry tooling early on and then the competitions. There was a question in there somewhere.
That's so interesting though, because I agree about not having these expectations defining how I'm showing up. And the negative self-talk, I'm like, I don't think that would work for me, but
Yeah, he
maybe,
said
yeah.
that's a very particular thing to him.
Yeah, I've got plenty of negative self-talk in there that I am working on minimizing. So
um, so, but you're at this SASV, and then you're also seeing women like Angelica Reiner and Marianne van der Steen, who are like D14, D15 climbers in the world, like just like the top of their field. And yeah, I guess like what was your takeaway from the from the event and from the World Cup season, and then how did that impact your next year in dry tooling?
yeah, I think I was really inspired watching other strong climbers. And it made me really motivated to say, I'm going to approach next season and I'm going to train differently. Um, I think I had alluded to when I was told I made the team, I was like, what does that mean? Like, how do I train? And I had been going to the rec team practices to get better, which at the time was the best thing for me to learn the skills and the basics. But I think seeing this, I was like, wow, to get on another level, like these people are strong and they are really committed to putting in the time and the effort um, to get to where they are. And so I think it did really light this fire of like, I want to do that too. I want to just be intentional about my training. I want to start earlier. I want to learn more about what good training looks like. So I think I walked away with a lot of gratitude for that and a lot of motivation. And I think coming into the next season, that was when the ice coop actually was closed for a part of the summer. So I remember thinking, shoot, well, I had this goal. I was going to go in and train all the time. And now the ice coop is closed. What do I even do? um, and so I actually downloaded an uphill athlete, like mixed climbing program, because I was like, I don't know, like I'm at a loss. This seems like the best thing. A lot of people have home walls. I don't have a home wall. Um, and so I like really committed to that. And remember we got like gymnastics rings and we hung those up in our house and I was attaching to my tools to things and just getting creative with the training. Um, and so in some ways I really do think that watching the other strong women helped fuel the motivation and some of the creativity of like, well, I bet those women wouldn't be stopped if their gym was closed down. Like, if this is something that really matters to you, then what can you do differently to still make it happen?
So it sounds like you're committing more and getting more invested in it. How is your mindset relating to to things in your second season?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. This is going to be the best season ever. And what I didn't realize is I also think I was developing expectations about what it looked like to progress and what it looked like to be better. I think this idea of like more is better. And I didn't even realize that at the start, like when I didn't know the skills and I would learn a new movement or learn a new hold and a good way to like put my pick on that. Um, I would see immediate results and I would see myself get stronger. I would make moves that I hadn't been able to make. And that was super exciting. And as I started to learn all of the holds that were available at the ice coop, and I was learning more of the movements, some of that kind of exponential growth started to taper off a little bit. And I think I was like looking for other ways to be like, oh, I'm still progressing. I'm getting better. I'm getting stronger. I want to know that I'm succeeding, that I'm moving forward, that I'm making progress towards this goal. And I think I kind of shifted that to then match a lot of the kind of default ways that I've looked at success, which has been like, what are the outputs? What are the rankings? How do I compare to other people? But what that also did is it didn't make me have that kind of magic, like being present in the moment, being grateful, celebrating the growth that I had made. It was more frustration around the mistakes, more around like, "Ugh, you know how to do that move now. You shouldn't have fallen off that. Or like that route is rated like an easier route. Why did you do that in such a sloppy manner?" And having some of that negative self talk that didn't actually help me do better. And so I did get stronger with the training. And I think I got harsher on myself in some ways too. And a lot of the initial reasons that I had been really drawn to the sport, the like fun challenge and the connection with the community, um, they were there, but I didn't hold them in the same way.
So you're getting stronger, you're understanding the holds, you're X, Y, and Z. I mean, you're a better climber in season 2. And then you're going into the World Cup season. maybe with a little bit more expectations. How did season 2 at the World Cups go?
Yeah, I remember going to South Korea, and in qualifiers, I fell off a move that I've done before at the coop, and I was really frustrated with myself. And I, for speed climbing, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do speed climbing. And another teammate had convinced me. They were like, "You flew all the way out here. You should do it. Whatever." And so I ultimately signed up for that. They give you warm up runs. I did a couple warm up runs. So I was feeling okay. And then it comes time to do the initial qualifier run. And I take one swing into the ice and immediately rip off. And in South Korea, if you fall in speed, you're done. You don't get other runs. Like, bye. And so I remember thinking like, well, that was so embarrassing. Why did I even do this? I knew I shouldn't have signed up for speed. Ma. And what I didn't realize until a little bit of time had passed and I had sat with it more, it was like I was going to the next World Cup in France. And I remember being presented with the opportunity of, do you want to sign up for speed? And my immediate reaction was like, no, because that was terrible. And I thought it was like, do you not wanna sign up s for speed because you don't enjoy speed, or is it because you don't like being bad at things? Because if that's the answer, that's a really crummy reason to not sign up, and, like, that's kind of, yeah, that's, like, lame. So, I told myself, "Okay, I'm gonna sign up for speed one more time, and if it goes terribly, then I don't have to ever do it again. I'll give it one more chance." So then in France, we started this speed laps, and I think it was my second run. I was being lowered and I turned to my teammate and I was like, "That was really fun." And he was like, "You can't unsay that. I heard you say it was fun. Like I'm going to record you. Like you can't take that back." And it made me realize that I think I was holding myself back in ways that nobody else was. I was telling myself, if I'm not going to do it perfect, like, why even try? And making up all these stories about what success looked like. And it was back to like, what's the output? What ranking did you get? Rather than what are the inputs and are you actually enjoying it for yourself? And that's hard to do in a competition. And I think what's tricky sometimes is in lead qualifications, I might climb something and feel like, you know what, I did all right. Like that was all okay. I could have been faster and, I could have held that hold differently, but I did okay for what I trained for and what I know. And then sometimes I'll watch other people go for another hour and I'll watch them get higher and I'll watch my name kind of like get bumped further and further down the list of people. And by the end of the afternoon, I'm like, that was so silly that I fell off that hold. And gosh, if I had done this strategic thing, like that would have made such a big difference. And I realized that so much of it is about how I relate to the experience, not the actual experience itself. Like if I can approach it in a way that's like, this is how I want to show up. This is who I want to be when I'm climbing. I want to be present. I want to have fun. I want to be connected to other people around me. I want to take in the experience the way I did my first year when I had very few expectations. I actually climbed better, which seems counterintuitive. But the times that I like put all this pressure on myself, that I'm harsh on myself, that I compare myself to others, um, it also makes me climb worse. So it's like a reinforcing cycle. And by the third World Cup, when I went to Saas-Fee, Switzerland, for speed climbing, I kind of had made a lot of those connections. And I had gotten practice, which is another thing. Like in the US, we don't have places to practice speed climbing. So I don't know why I thought I was going to magically just be good at it. But I was kind of like, okay, like, look at what happened. South Korea, you fell in the first swing. You could only go up from there. Like France, it went better. And you even told your teammate that it was fun. Like, whatever, just do your best. Like, make a goal to not stab yourself if possible, because that's a thing. And just like who cares? Like, in 2 months' time, what do you want to remember? What do you want to look back on? You want this to have been fun. You don't want to just been angry the whole time and then get home and be like, oh, I was in Switzerland and I didn't enjoy it. Again, easier said than done, but I just kind of tried to shift into that mindset of like, this is a little ridiculous. Speed is a ridiculous sport too. And man, they're playing some fun music. Like, what? I'm going to enjoy that. And I'm going to chat with the other competitors around me that I don't know as well. And I'm going to like just be present with what's here. And that was where I magically shaved 10 seconds off of my second run and was temporarily in third place and then ended up in fourth place at a World Cup. And like, pff, who would have seen that happening when I fell off like immediately in South Korea? And I really think a big part of it was that I just really tried to push myself to let it go a little bit more. Cause I mean, I could also train and perfect everything and I could still fall off something. Like it doesn't take out the uncertainty. But it makes it a lot more fun.
From just starting dry tooling to trying speed for the first time at the World Cups and then finishing fourth. That's pretty remarkable rocket rise. Is the takeaway that we should just never have expectations about anything?
That's a good question. And it's funny too. It makes me realize I don't think I talked about this at all because I forgot. But I did do speed that first year in Switzerland as well. And I remember you have to make it to the top of the ice in a minute, or they're like, okay, you basically get counted as a DNF or like a fall. And I remember my goal my first year in speed was I just want to make it before the minute. And I remember I was a hot mess. I did not know what I was doing. I was so terrified of the fifis. And I made it in 59.8 seconds. And I was like, yes, at the top of the speed wall. And I'm sure the other competitors were like, does she realize that's like not good? But for me, I was like, that was the expectation I set for myself was like, I want to just do my best. And right now, my best is like, can I not time out? Come. But what it was really about is like, I want to do my best with what I know, which is very little. And I want to be intentional about my pick place or my, placement so that I don't stab myself. And so to me, that was like a really exciting experience when I'm sure other athletes are like, the Americans, I don't know. I don't know about them. So like, I don't know that it's not having expectations ever because I think, and maybe it's not, maybe the word expectation is what I'm struggling with. Maybe it's like, I want to have intentions and I want to have intentions about who I'm going to be and how I'm going to show up. And like, to do that, yes, I would be better served by training. If I want to do my best, I would like to feel strong. I would like to feel confident. And to have those things, I would benefit from training. I would benefit from learning more holds. I would benefit from learning different movements and practicing them so that it helps to fuel and really reinforce that confidence. And like there are times too when unexpected injuries pop up and it's like, oh, well, you know, it doesn't mean my training has to be thrown in the trash, but I might have to modify it. I might have to be creative and I may adjust my intentions to think about what it means to show up feeling strong with what's realistic, with what's in front of me. So, yeah, I don't know that never having expectations is what I want to go for, but I think having intentions and having compassion for myself when those might shift based on new information or circumstances.
In an article you wrote for the American Alpine Club, I think as a recap for the World Cup season 2 for you, you talked about, or you mentioned that at the end of the season, you didn't like where your headspace was at, but then you also finished fourth in speed. So I guess like where was that conflict coming from? And, you know, where's your mindset these days?
When I wrote that article, I was focused a lot on the areas where I knew I was still getting in my own way. Because that the finishing fourth in speed was kind of like the last event that I did through the three World Cups in the season. Um, and I think in my mind when I wrote the article, I was like, I wish that I had had that mindset at the beginning, and I wish I had, soaked up every moment, because there were also moments where I was snippy about like getting groceries for the house because I was stressed about the competition, and I was like, I need to be ready at this time, and how are we going to get groceries? And so there were moments like that too, where I was like, I made a big deal out of something that wasn't, because I was still feeling stressed. And I guess when I look back now, I also have kind of realized that I think that needed to play out in the way that it did for me to be where I am now. I think if I had had that mindset earlier on, there wouldn't have been as much value in what I was taking away from the experience. I actually think I might shift that now to say, um, that I'm grateful for how that progressed and where I still need to grow, because I think that also is something that I get to then think a lot more critically about and bring into my own coaching when I coach one of the Ice Coop Rec teams this season.
In that same article, I'm going to read a quote from you along the lines of what you just said. As a woman who has been drawn to sports historically dominated by athletes identifying as male, I have often leveraged perfectionism as a way to prove that I'm good enough to belong in a given space. Asking for help is something I've learned to avoid at all costs. I have a tendency to approach other women with a slight hesitation or skepticism, as I try to assess how others might compare my performance to hers. Vulnerability is something I don't share easily. Do you think does that still resonate?
Yeah, I think that also probably has a bit to do with how I first got into climbing. Kind of, I got into climbing because of a man I was dating. I got into mountaineering in a space that was dominated more by men. And so I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to be like, well, I'll show you, or I'll prove myself. Um, and I think sometimes at early on, when there were fewer women in those spaces, I kind of felt like, well, that is who I need to compare myself to in some ways, because I'm not going to be at the same level of the men. Um, so if I don't have a close relationship with someone, like another woman in that space, then I think I sometimes see them as like competition. And I think one thing that I've really appreciated about the Ice Coop is that it is a space where I have not felt that same way. When I first approached going to ladies' night, like I was really anxious about it. And it was like, oh, I'm going to go with my friend and we're going to kind of do our own thing in the corner, and it's fine. I don't need to talk to people. If it's a shambles, I'll never come back and no one will know me and it'll be fine. When I kind of went into my second season and put some of those expectations on myself, I think I did risk kind of pulling back a little bit and being like, I need to like train really hard, and I need to just like get to this place where there are only 10 women selected, and I need to really focus on myself. And I think in that same season, I noticed that, similar to like letting go of some of my expectations, helped to make me a better climber. I think I really saw firsthand how like training with other women helped to make me a better climber. I think about the article that you sent me that Corey Buhay wrote, and I know she alluded to, like, for women especially, it felt like a space that there wasn't as much support and there wasn't as much kind of history for women. And that was really challenging. And I think in the article, there was one point she referenced where each woman had kind of like almost gone into their own little bubble. And like one person was kind of doing their own warm up routine over here. One person had kind of chosen to do something else. And it was a lot of like anxiety, I think, and kind of like pulling back in those moments where things were uncertain or where there was pressure for the competition. And I think I've noticed myself do that as well. When I get stressed out, I'll step away thinking that like, oh, I'll just like get it together over here and I'll like do all my training and then I can get back in the community when things are like put together a little bit more. And I think being vulnerable and showing up, even a little bit messy, collectively with other people can be so much more powerful. And especially with the ice coop, too. I mean, I've seen in the last year and a half, the board has been so intentional about bringing in more volunteers and bringing in the community and really creating an organization that is really inclusive, having events for different groups, having multiple clinics, and having a space where anyone is welcome to come in and learn new skills, even if it's intimidating or new. And I think sometimes it can feel that way as a woman in male dominated spaces, but I don't get better at them by choosing not to go to those clinics out of fear of like being messy. I think the opportunity to train with other women, especially like with Kat Shirley as a coach, really helped me think about I may need to do something differently than like my husband does, and that's okay. And um, it's actually going to be more fun to be able to build the community while I do it. And I'm really hoping that it's something that we can continue to build and continue to bring in other strong women so that more and more women in the community can see themselves in dry tooling and can see themselves in these spaces. Because I think that made a big difference for me and helped shape my own path a lot.
So, with that in mind, what are your hopes for the future of dry tooling for women in the US?
We recently had the USA team tryouts in Albany, New York, and I was fortunate enough to be part of the kind of planning committee for that. And a big reason that we chose the gym out there is because we really want to expand this sport. We want to expand the community. And I feel very privileged to have the ice coop in Boulder. And I know there are a couple other contingents across the US, a group in Seattle, a group in Salt Lake City, and then some in Milwaukee. And it feels as though dry tooling is not actually like nationally a sport just yet. It doesn't seem like there are facilities and communities that really bring people in. And I loved getting to meet new people. In particular, there was one woman I spoke with who was talking about how she kind of rediscovered climbing as an adult, and it just gave her this new sense of excitement and joy that felt like it was missing from her life. And then she was like, and then I heard about the ice coop, and then I heard about dry tooling, and then I heard about this event, and I signed up, and I was like, that's so incredible. And I think I would love to hear more stories like that where people feel comfortable and confident, specifically women, but everyone, going to events or to gyms or to communities where they get to learn more about dry tooling. They get to practice in a way that feels safe and comfortable to them, and that it can be something that is not just exclusive to the locations where there are these gym training facilities, but that it's something that's actually more widespread.
Will the AAC help fund more dry tooling gyms then?
You'll have to ask them.
So what are your non-expectations slash intentions for the third season?
One thing I set as an intention going into this season, I think based on some of my reflections from the past couple years, are that I really want to have more fun with the sport, kind of ground myself back in the playfulness of it, and to embrace the messiness, to embrace the imperfections of it, to embrace having no idea how to do a certain route or a certain move and asking for help on it. I think I have sometimes felt like, oh my gosh, well, if other people have expectations of who you are, and then you're like, I don't know how to do this move, like they're not going to trust you. They're going to think you're like some kind of phony. It's like imposter syndrome. Like you have to have all the answers to like be actually worthy of the, I don't know, the title of coach. And my intention is to like really work to chip away at that. I would love to say it would be a light switch and just something I could flip off. Um, but yeah, I think embracing the mistakes, embracing not knowing something and saying that and working to get better at it. And, but like not in a way that I'm punishing myself for it, in a way that it's like, huh, that's fun. Like, how can we be creative and playful here? Like, what's a different way we could do it?
Can we make a T-shirt where it says "We're flipping off expectations"?
Yes, please.
With your shift of trying new things maybe without expectations, such as dry tooling, you also started a business. Was that related? Is that sort of in a similar vein? And what are you doing? What is the business?
It's funny how it's kind of been something that's happened alongside my dry tooling journey. And I do think that that's been a part of it. I was working at an ed tech startup and I was managing a team of coaches. And I loved the coaching work. I took a bunch of coaching training classes while I was there in support of that job. And as time went on, I kind of had this longing to do coaching on my own, separate from the work, but kept rationalizing why it made sense to stay there. And last October, I was let go. And so it seemed like the perfect impetus to say, okay, well, you've been making a bunch of excuses and now they're not there. So this is something you're serious about. You should do it. So I completed a coaching certification program. And it was also around the same time that the World Cups were happening in January of 2023. So it was something I didn't expect to happen there, where I then was able to take the month to travel and go to all three of the World Cups. Um, and I'm working now with one-on-one individuals as a professional coach. And I've been working mostly with women, often women who have, in similar ways, kind of hit this wall somewhere in their personal professional life and realize like I'm maybe not living as consciously as I want to be, like in alignment with myself and my values. That's a journey that I've walked myself in the past few years, where I poured so much into work and I had these other longings or passions, and I kind of would table them or say, like, they're not as important, or I can get to them when. I kept putting things off. And I think a big part of what dry tooling unlocks for me is stop waiting. Like, why can't you do this? You're making the rules here in your head, change them. And so making the spontaneous decision to go to Michigan that resulted in me making the team and offered the opportunity to then travel and compete internationally, and to think about like, what would it be like if I just approached this in a way that I like had fun and I really worked on my own expectations around this experience and tried to be more present, um, made me realize that that was so much more powerful than anything I could have accomplished in my professional work previously. And so I also now have expanded to work with individuals who are like a beginner in some ways in their life, whether that's like navigating a big transition or an aspect of their identity is shifting due to, I don't know, getting laid off, or due to like kids going away to school and changing what that looks like for how you want to show up as a parent and a human, and like what is your own identity. And so that's something that's been really fulfilling. And yeah, obviously a lot of these topics are things that I'm still working on day to day. I would love to say like, "Oh, I have them all figured out and everything's great." And that's not always the case, but it's the like messy reality of being a human.
Last question. If you were to give your younger self one piece of beta, what would that be?
Oh, I love that question. Um, you don't have to do it for anyone but yourself. Like the climbing, the competing, how you choose to spend your time is up to you. And like focus on pleasing yourself and doing things that you're passionate about, not what you deem other people to perceive to be important.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Really appreciate you chatting.
Yeah, thank you.
As I noted earlier, we've got a bit of a bulletin today, including a Screaming Barfie challenge. Starting with USA's ice climbing team, for the athletes, it is essentially pay your own way. If you'd like to support the team for the upcoming World Cup season, you can donate at americanalpineclub.org/US-ice-climbing-team. If you find yourself in the Boulder, Denver area and would like to climb at what is the premier dry tooling gym in the country, be sure to check out the Ice Coop. While Boulder sucks, the Ice Coop is rad, and that is my opinion. You can learn more about upcoming events and their hours at theicecoop.org. Lastly, if you'd like to connect with Ryan for dry tooling coaching, you can message her on Instagram at RyanE_MCCAULEY, Ryan_McCauley. And for professional coaching, her LinkedIn is linkedin.com/in/Ryan, RYAN-McCauley. And of course, all of the links will be in the show notes. Now on to the challenge. You didn't ask for it, but we're bringing it to you. An ice tool hang with icy cold hands. Why? Well, because ice climbing season is getting shorter in most places, and that makes me sick to my stomach. Kinda like Screaming Barfies. So, the Screaming for Climate Change challenge is a way to have a little fun and raise money for the American Alpine Club, which is doing important research, advocacy, and policy work around the impact of climate change on climbing, specifically ice climbing. Plus, we're a masochistic bunch, and freezing your hands is hella fun. And did I mention prizes? To learn more, head to icicebeta.com/screaming-barfies-fundraiser. So icicebeta.com/screaming-barfies-fundraiser. Wrapping up, thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, remember that sharing is caring, so consider sending it along to a friend. That shows you really, really care.